Okay, good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Jennifer DeSena, the supervisor of the town of North Hempstead. And for 5 years before I became the supervisor, I was the executive director of the Manhasset Coalition Against Substance Abuse. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight with several healthcare professionals who I used to work with. Also, Connie Bruno, the project director of Manhasset CASA. Jeff Stone and Kathy Levinson of Project Help. Of course, we have Steve Chasman of LICADD, who will be introducing most of our program. I had the privilege of working with these healthcare professionals and community leaders to educate. We educate in schools, in libraries, to try and teach our children to make healthy choices. We all know someone who's suffering from anxiety, maybe attention deficit disorder. These are people who are vulnerable. These are our most vulnerable, who might self-medicate and find something that they're going to use and that might take them down a difficult path. But these days, there's a new change. There's a new poison. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight. With this new poison, there's no time for addiction, no time for treatment, and sometimes no time for learning from a mistake. During the COVID pandemic, we unfortunately lost a lot of the progress that had been made as people were forced to stay home, away from the resources, away from the treatment that was helping them. And now we, in the past year, experienced the highest number of overdoses ever in our country, 110,000 preventable deaths. And that's why we're here tonight, is to try and spare some families the terrible experience that some of us have felt. We're here to warn tonight that in this new paradigm, one pill, one time can be all that it takes. The days of experimentation are over. In the past, we have fought against the idea that substance use is any kind of a moral failing, which it is not. We're all here to help, and we know that treatment can help, like with any illness. But when we have people dying from poison, college students who think they're taking Xanax, who think they're taking Adderall to help them study, and they're dying from a poison, this is a crisis. This is a healthcare emergency. If we had a plane carrying 300 people crash every day, we would close the airports. And so tonight we're all here to sound the alarm and reach out to our families and let them know we all have to learn. We all have to be educated about this poison. So with that, I would like to call up the executive director of LICADD, Steve Chasman, to tell us all the great work LICADD has been doing.
Thank you, Supervisor DeSena, and we're glad you're all here tonight. You know, we vowed at LICADD because there's too many mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and grandparents. 110,000 in a 12-month period is as tragic a year as we've been recorded in American history. And these are not so much overdoses as they're poisonings. So you know how you end public health crises? Everyone chips in. And Supervisor Jen DeSena, we came to her, as she has a long history on Long Island of being a leader in public health, and said, we want to alert all of our communities. Will you set up a forum? And as any good elected official, but also as someone who's a leader, said, of course we can. So thank you, Supervisor DeSena, for hosting this forum. But everyone pitches it, and I see some people from the media here. LICADD has been around since 1956. We're in both counties. We've been handing out naloxone for 11 years. And I have to tell you, we believe in the miracle of recovery. Right now, there's 30 million people living in long-term sustained recovery from substance use disorders. That miracle becomes null and void if someone dies of a fatal poisoning or overdose. And we're doing everything we can in our power to stop that. And by the way, it's not just not-for-profits or social workers or elected officials. We have members here from our Nassau County enforcement. You're going to hear from a detective lieutenant him and the men and women, Nassau County Police on the front lines. You're going to hear from Mr. Bradley King, who's up next from the U.S. Attorney's Office and what we're seeing on the front lines in working in New York State. You're going to be hearing for a not-for-profit, for a treatment center that's been existing on Long Island for 40 years. And most importantly, you're going to hear from mothers and fathers and a grandfather who has had, unfortunately, they belong to a club. They'll tell you they want no one else to be a member for. So this is how you end public health crises. Everyone pitches in, and we alert the communities, we alert our elected officials, we alert parents, and everyone we needs to chip in. They say in times of great crisis, there is no crisis more detrimental to communities than to do absolutely nothing. Supervisor DeSena, you have done something tonight. Thank you for bringing all of us together. To the media that is here covering, yes, we're going to be speaking to as many people as in this room, but to our local news stations, to your town media, please, we're going to blast this out. We consider this life-saving education. And with that, LICADD is eternally grateful for Supervisor DeSena. We're going to move pretty fast through tonight because there's a lot of information, and it is life-saving information. With that, please say hello from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Mr. Bradley King.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Supervisor DeSena, for inviting me here tonight. Thank you, Steve, for that very kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here tonight on behalf of Breon Peace, who is the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York. I'm here today representing him, but I'm also here today as a neighbor, a father of 2 daughters, a graduate of St. Mary's High School right down the road, and someone who's deeply concerned about a public health crisis that is affecting our communities. I've been a prosecutor since 2009, so almost 15 years. I started my career in the Manhattan DA's office doing narcotics cases, and I continue to work on narcotics cases as a U.S. attorney. And one thing that I found in prosecuting narcotics cases for more than a decade is that drugs are based on false promises. Drugs promise you that you'll feel better if you use them. In my experience, you do not feel better when you use drugs. They make you feel worse. Drugs promise that they'll solve your problems, but in my experience, you have more problems when you use drugs because you're not dealing with problems that cause you to go to find drugs. But in the case of fentanyl, the false promise is actually 100% real because many times individuals are purchasing what they believe to be pills, like Xanax, what they believe to be heroin, other opioids, what they believe to be cocaine. And in fact, they are being lied to. They are being sold drugs, street drugs, and counterfeit pills that contain deadly amounts of fentanyl. These individuals had no interest in fentanyl. They do not want to ingest just about 10 to 15 grams of the equivalent of 10 to 15 grams of salt, 2 milligrams of fentanyl that could kill you on one dosage. They didn't want to do that. But drug dealers found a way to make more money by cutting their products with fentanyl that's cheap. And they're doing this, and they're doing it to the detriment of the people who are buying these drugs and not even knowing what they're getting. This is a public health crisis. The way that you attack public health crises is by giving people information, letting folks know that there aren't safe street drugs in this environment. I will show you some examples where people were buying cocaine. People who were very accomplished individuals, they died. The individual who sold them these drugs knew that people were dying. It continued to sell for profit. That is appalling. I think that everyone in my position who's done cases like this is fighting to make sure that anyone who would do that is going to suffer some harsh consequences. But really, we hope that we never have to do these cases again. We want the demand to go away. We want people to understand that it's not a safe environment to buy street drugs. And I'm going to tell you some about the work that we're doing in our office. I'm going to share with you some information that I hope will act as ripples in a pond. That those of you who are here tonight, those of you who are joining by video, please go and tell this message to those around you, the people that you love who are at risk for falling prey to drug dealers, that it's not a safe environment. This era of experimentation is over because one mistake could be your last. So fentanyl is here with deadly consequences, and it's affecting very young people. Supervisor DeSena made a point that I'll get to later. There are children out there, kids in high school, kids in college, who are taking pills like Adderall to get an edge to study. Pills have fentanyl in it. They are not bargaining for deadly opioids, but that's what they're getting because people with a profit motive are putting those deadly substances there. So there's a lot of young folks that are being affected by this. Teen overdoses are spiking tremendously. A 94% increase in 2004, 77% increase in 2021. Supervisor DeSena referenced the 110,000 people that were lost last year. The Vietnam conflict, more than a decade, 58,000 U.S. troops died, and we consider that a huge tragedy. In 1 year, we lost almost twice as many people to this. That is appalling. That needs to stop. This is data from the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. 2021, the last year where full data is available, 2,700 overdose deaths, one nearly every 3 hours. A person falling prey to this every 3 hours. Very, very, very disturbing. This is the public health emergency of our times. People need to understand how serious this is and why it's going on. So if you look at this slide, I think this is really telling to anyone you might be discussing this with after this presentation. That's a penny, a very small object. The grains next to it represents 2 milligrams of fentanyl. Just that much fentanyl is enough to end someone's life. And let me tell you, in doing investigations into fentanyl and sitting across and interviewing drug dealers, there is no quality control. There is no recipe book that teaches people how to prepare fentanyl. People are guessing. People are taking their cues from addicts who are testing these substances. This is incredibly scary, and perversely, a drug dealer's ability to sell fentanyl is often correlated with how dangerous the drug is. That is, people will seek out fentanyl that they hear is particularly deadly. Just that much could kill. That is very scary. So, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine and many times more potent than heroin. If any of you have had surgery and been put on painkillers, you understand what taking a small amount of an opioid can do to you. And this is hundreds of times or many times more powerful than that. 2 milligrams of fentanyl is considered lethal, but many dealers are putting twice that amount, more than twice that amount, into counterfeit pills that they're selling. So if you think about that, a drug dealer is going out purporting to sell oxycodone, purporting to sell Xanax, and knowing that there is no oxycodone and there's no Xanax in there, there's deadly material in there. It's in there because it's cheaper for the drug dealer and much more dangerous to anyone who's purchasing it. I'm going to give you some examples. I talked about harsh penalties. I emphasize the penalties because if someone is caught distributing this kind of deadly opioid in our community, my office is committed to seeking severe consequences and penalties against people who would do that in this environment. Let me be clear. In this environment, when you're selling pills on the street, when you're selling any kind of street drug, you are selling fentanyl. Fentanyl is what is in these substances at this point. So you know when you're selling counterfeit pills, they contain fentanyl. So in this case, a woman went out to buy heroin. She's 21 years old from Massapequa. She purchased what she thought was heroin. She purchased fentanyl. She died. One shot. The individual who sold it to her is serving 16 and a half years in prison, which is a significant sentence. But that is never bringing that 21-year-old woman with all the promise that she had back. Drugs are based on false promises. This woman had real promise and lost her life so that someone could make some money selling drugs, and that needs to stop. And the way it stops is by people being educated and not seeking these substances out, knowing how dangerous they are. In another case that our office prosecuted, individuals are preparing large quantities of counterfeit pills using a pill press. They're preparing crack cocaine. They're preparing fentanyl. They're preparing crack cocaine. They're preparing heroin and oxycodone pills, and they're stretching it all with fentanyl. When the search warrant was executed in this case, all of this is being done in a garage where powders and pills are being mixed in Home Depot buckets. There is no quality control. These dealers are not looking out for the people they're selling to. They are looking to make money. They're looking to make it as quick as possible. And in this case, luckily nobody died and the woman was sentenced to 10 years in prison. But still, the potential, had these substances not been seized, it's staggering to think about how many people could have been harmed with these drugs. This was the case I referenced earlier that was done by our colleagues in the Southern District of New York. There was a defendant operating a drug delivery service. These professional people, a social worker, a banker, and a lawyer, all extremely highly educated people, right? They wanted to party with cocaine. That's what they bargained for. That's what they wanted. They contacted a delivery service to purchase cocaine. They got fentanyl, and they all died on the same night. Now, again, the individual who sold this to them, he was convicted at trial. He's facing 20 years to life in prison, and he should be facing that, particularly because in this case, there were text messages that showed people told him, the cocaine you're selling is causing people to die. It did nothing. That's the kind of environment we're in, where a drug dealer can get that kind of text message, which to an ordinary person, the red flags are up, the alarm bells are ringing, and you don't want to sell anymore. That's not what happened here. These three people lost their lives because they relied on somebody who did not care about their lives, who cared about making money. Folks need to understand that when they go to the street for drugs, this is the environment you're in. This is what you're dealing with. Opioids and the opioid crisis affect people from all walks of life. This individual didn't purchase any fentanyl. He didn't purchase anything that was counterfeit, but he became addicted to heroin after initially getting a prescription for oxycodone. He was a champion wrestler. He went to the street, he purchased heroin, $100 worth of heroin, ended his life. So the point of that is, look, everyone is affected. This is a highly accomplished individual. The people on the earlier slide are incredibly educated. They didn't think they were going to die, but the reality is they're up against a situation where the likelihood of death is much more than they suspect. And if they knew today if they could foresee the future, they would never touch these substances. And it would be best if nobody did. It's important for folks to know who it is that's behind this. This is a case that I did in our district. I was dealing with a individual who is a gang member. He's out on probation. He's out on probation, supervised release, and bail. He's selling people on Instagram what he says is oxycodone. People like his price. They want oxycodone, but he's selling them fentanyl. He's actually caught while he's on bail selling fentanyl, released again, continues to sell. He's ultimately caught with 56 grams of fentanyl. But all the people he put at risk had no idea that they were buying fentanyl, no idea probably that the person who was delivering it to them was a violent gang member. Something for people to understand: when you go to the street to purchase these substances, when you're calling delivery services and inviting people to your home, many times you're inviting people who are not just drug dealers. These are violent individuals who are in this to make money, to finance violent activities. There was mention earlier in the presentation about children, the mistakes that you make as a child, whether you're a child in high school, whether you're in college. There's often time in your life to make mistakes, but what's going on now is that when you're making mistakes in this area with respect to drugs, you're putting a lot of people at risk. So just in September of 2022, out in Los Angeles, California, 15-year-old brings in what he thinks are oxycodone pills for people in school to try. 7 people OD, one person dead, and this individual charged with manslaughter. Disaster. Kids in high school need to know that. If you're thinking about this, it's the wrong thing to think about. There is no room for experimentation because this is the type of thing that happens. Please, experiment with something else. Experiment with all the promise and talent and ability that you have, academically, athletically, musically, you name it. But stay away from this because it's a disaster. This is the Adderall case that I mentioned earlier. Students online looking for an edge. They go online to buy Adderall. They want to study harder. They want to better themselves. Individual sells them what he tells them is Adderall, but he knows it's fentanyl. How does he know it's fentanyl? People are telling him online. People are dying from what you're selling. He keeps going. 11 people died. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. But that's not bringing anybody back. That's not bringing anybody back. That's the right result, but it's not bringing anyone back. And so the better thing to do is just cut this off at the source. Don't go to someone like this over the internet. Understand what you're going to get into if you do. That's fentanyl. Looks like oxycodone to me. I've done a lot of oxycodone cases. I could not tell the difference. Absolutely not. So I doubt that anybody who's desperate for oxycodone could. But that's what's being sold as oxycodone. It's fentanyl. Twice as much generally in each pill, sufficient to kill you. 2 milligrams, those small grains next to the penny. Xanax, again, this is seized Xanax that had fentanyl in it. I could not tell the difference, and I doubt that anybody else could. And now it's being marketed to kids in rainbow form. Horrible, horrible. And it's all based on making money. Knowing in this environment that any of these pills could kill someone and going out and selling it and marketing it to kids. People need to know about this and they need to put a stop to it. And now we're into a whole nother realm. That we're cracking down on fentanyl and people are using this thing called xylazine. I'm going to mention it very briefly, and I'm going to let other people take their time. But there's an animal tranquilizer out there that's being used to cut drugs now. It causes severe problems for folks. Let's talk about those very quickly. It causes wounds and sores on your bodies, infections leading to amputation. One user is describing it as a sickness more intense than fentanyl, where you feel like you're going to die. And the reason that this is happening is because even though there's been a crackdown on fentanyl, people are still going to the street for drugs. So it really has been a pleasure to speak with everyone tonight. The bottom line is this: street drugs, pills that you buy on the street, not safe. Very likely to cause severe consequences. Best thing to do is stay away from them. We're not in an era of experimentation. We're in an era where we have to understand drug dealers are trying to exploit people who need help, who should seek help in other ways. And I'm very happy to have been here with you tonight to offer you some information about that. And again, I hope you take the information that I've given you, bring it to your family, bring it to your loved ones, and please, let's all work together to try to stop this public health crisis. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you.
So, takeaway message: the national drug supply is tainted with a poison called fentanyl. We are tracking xylazine, or better known as tranq. Tonight, thank you, Supervisor DeSena. LICADD has donated 50 kits of naloxone or Narcan. It brings people at a near fatal opioid overdose. Please let not the message get skewed. As the national drug supply is tainted and xylazine is on the scene, xylazine is not an opioid, but please, if someone is overdosing, please continue to administer Narcan or naloxone. Last year on Long Island, and LICADD has been distributing these for 11 years. Last year on Long Island, these naloxone saved 1,500 lives, primarily from our men and women in law enforcement. So we want to thank Commissioner Pat Ryder, and we have Detective Lieutenant Matt Landman tonight to come on up and say a few words to our law enforcement in Nassau County. Thank you.
My name is Matt Landman. I'm with the Nassau County Police Department. I always start off before I speak also saying I am a parent. I have 3 children. I have a senior, a 7th grader, and a 4th grader. I always make it a point to say that. I typically speak to students at high schools so that they know I'm not just speaking from the police department, but also as a concerned parent, because I think we all have similar roles like that. While we might have a specific role, we are also parents as well. You did a very good job of covering most of these things. The overdose numbers we're seeing are staggering. And obviously, Nassau County is not immune. No community is immune, actually. I make a big point to talk about demographics and discrimination. And when it comes to these drugs, there is no discrimination whatsoever. No one is safe. It affects every single community. It doesn't make a difference your wealth, age, race, religion, sex. It doesn't matter. It affects all communities. And it will basically, the fentanyl will kill anybody that gets its hands on. The number one problem we are seeing is pills. Obviously, fentanyl isn't everything. There is no more heroin. When we test the drugs, it does not come back as heroin anymore. It always comes back as fentanyl, or with some cutting agent. And that being said, the pills are the biggest problem, because I used to think it was just kids, but I think it's along the lines of adults as well, is they think it's just a pill. I'm not smoking crack or snorting coke or shooting heroin or meth or any Molly or ecstasy, or it's just a pill. Yes, they are just pills when they're in a pill bottle with your name on it that was prescribed to you by your doctor. But if you're taking a pill from the street from some random person, it's like playing Russian roulette and putting a gun to your head and pulling the trigger every time you do that. So every drug dealer has a certain amount of drugs, and they always want to take this amount of drugs and turn it into this. And they mentioned that they'll mix it in buckets or whatnot. These are not optimal ways to mix drugs. And oftentimes drug dealers will mix it in a bullet blender. But unfortunately, these drugs are not like a smoothie. You're not getting an equal amount of blueberries and strawberries and banana in every sip that you take. Okay, so they think they're doing a really good job mixing up their drugs, but unfortunately, fentanyl has specific properties that require it to be heated a certain way when it's mixed, which this can only be accomplished in the scientific lab. So when they mix it up, they get this big blob of mix between the cutting agent and the drug, and it sticks together in one blob like that because it has almost like these static cling properties when it's not heated properly. So when they take their mix, anybody that gets a pill from that certain area where all that fentanyl is, those are all going to result in fatal drug deaths. And Mr. Cass made a good point about that they're poisonings. They're not overdose deaths. They are drug poisonings. There is no chance for them to get any type of rehabilitation because there are no after pictures. There's no before and after pictures when it comes to fentanyl. There's only before because it could be a one-time deal, one shot. So, again, with the pills. If there's one thing that I could get across to everybody, adults, children, whoever I speak to, if it's not a pill that is prescribed to you by your doctor that you and or your parents picked up from the pharmacy, please don't take it. Now, while we have not actually seen the rainbow fentanyls here on Long Island, they are in fact here. About 6 months ago, the DEA seized about 300,000 of those pills in the Bronx. So if it's in the Bronx, they're coming here. And in regards to the xylazine, we have certain mechanisms to test the drugs, and we are seeing xylazine. It is here already. There's nothing we can do to stop it. It is here. So in addition to the nasty things that it causes as far as like flesh eating and sores and whatnot, it has similar effects to fentanyl. So it will suppress the respiratory system. It is a large animal tranquilizer. It's used to put animals, out so that they can operate on them or do something on them. Okay, it's not fit for human consumption. So if something has both fentanyl and xylazine in it, and someone is lucky enough to have Narcan around, it will not work because the Narcan only works on opioids, and xylazine is not an opioid. So this is another danger that's posed now in the drug supply. So not only is everything tainted with fentanyl, now xylazine is being mixed in. And fentanyl is in virtually every single drug. We've seen it mixed in with meth, with cocaine, and obviously the number one is press pills. And we haven't seen it here, but there have been a few documented cases where fentanyl has been mixed in with marijuana, whether it was accidental or not. That has been the case in some places. But Nassau County, 2 weeks ago we seized 3 kilos of fentanyl on a car stop. So we talked about the 2 milligrams. I'd like to put that into perspective for everybody. Everybody's been to the diner, and everybody knows what a packet of sugar looks like, or what a packet of sugar is. Okay, that's 1 gram. Is 1,000 milligrams in 1 packet of sugar. So a packet of sugar's worth of fentanyl in 2 milligram doses could kill 500 people. That is how powerful it is. And unfortunately, the problem is not going away. Okay, the police department, we have a multi-pronged approach. Education and awareness, which I personally feel is the most important part. We have to educate everybody. There's enforcement, which the police department is responsible with, as well as all the other agencies we work with, whether state agencies to east and west of us or federal agencies. There is diversion, which is through the court system. Obviously, there are tons of treatment services that are available, and as well as aftercare visits. Aftercare visits is something the police department does as well, where when someone does overdose, we will respond within the following weeks to follow up with them In addition to responding initially, the day it happens, we respond again within a few weeks to follow up them, see if there's anything we can offer them, any services we can offer to help them out. Education and awareness is number one. We have to educate our kids. We have to educate our communities. This is not something where I urge people, please don't be the never my kid parents. And I urge students, please don't be the it's never going to happen to me, because no one is immune from this. It affects everyone and will kill anybody that gets its hands on. The number of fatal overdoses or drug deaths that I've responded to, it's staggering, and it's heartbreaking, especially when you see anyone, a young person. And the big problem is too, we're not just talking about addicts or someone that has a substance abuse problem. We're talking about people that are trying something, let's say for the first time, and they think that they're taking drug A and it's really drug B, which has fentanyl in it. And I often get asked, oh, they're laced with fentanyl. I'm like, no. I go, they're not laced with fentanyl at all. A fake Xanax pill is not going to have any alprazolam in it at all. It's going to have some cutting agent and fentanyl or some fentanyl derivative in it. And it's not laced. It's intentionally made fake. It's intentionally made so that you cannot decipher whether it's real or not. So again, I'm coming back to the pills. It's the number one message that I would say to get out there to everyone in the community. And to spread it to everyone that you know, that please, if it's not a pill that is prescribed to you, please don't take it, because you're risking your life every single time that you take a pill that's not prescribed to you.
I want to acknowledge Bruce Kennedy here. He's been on the LICADD board for over 20 years. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Elected official in his own right, but a compassionate and caring human being that has put a lot of energy into Long Island Council for over a quarter century. So thank you, Bruce. Our next speaker, I think we welcomed in our living rooms for many, many decades as a respected journalist. He was very much the face that gave us all the good news and the not so good news. He's a trusted member of the Long Island community and beyond. But I think we invite him here tonight as he has a personal story to say. So with that, Mr. Drew Scott.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'm living proof that if it happens to my family, it can happen to any family on Long Island, believe me. The other message that I have tonight is don't let the stigma freeze you in place. Talk about this problem to your neighbors, to your friends. Talk about it to your children, to your grandchildren. Let them know that we're aware of these problems. Now, this beautiful young girl is Hallie Ray Ulrich. She was 22 years old. She was my granddaughter. And she was a twin. Her sister Ellison is now living in Hawaii. But Hallie Ray was a very gifted child. She had a scholarship and was at Pratt University as an art student. And she had a boyfriend, a bad boyfriend, who had a terrible habit, and that was heroin addiction. And he wanted to share his misery with her. She loved him, and she wanted to share his love, so she adopted his heroin to please him. And we fought the addiction for about a year. And then one time in September of 2017, this youngster, her body was found dumped on the side of a road. What happened was her boyfriend injected her with what he thought was heroin. It turned out to be nearly pure fentanyl. She died immediately. He panicked, dumped her body, tried to call EMS, but couldn't get through because of the location. It was in East Hampton in a remote spot. And so he ran off, stole her car, took her wallet, took her debit card, and promptly went to an ATM in Southampton and bought more heroin. and a day later, he died as well. We often think about Romeo and Juliet. This is kind of a modern day Romeo and Juliet story, but I often think what could have been this youngster. She was very gifted, very talented, and very artistic. She painted a lot of figurines in Southampton, and when you drive out there, sometimes on Route 39, you'll see a lot of painted figurines. She was very good at that. And the last thing she did was painted a cow for a vineyard in California. Hallie Ray, we remembered, fought valiantly to try to get off her addiction, but it was that one time with fentanyl that she could not battle. Now, I often think about the abuse that she suffered and trying to please the person that she loved with the Gabby Petito case that happened about a year ago. And if a Southampton police officer had intervened at the time when she called the police for help, maybe it would have been a different story, but they went back together and walked off into East Hampton, and that was the end of it. But she did file a report, but nothing happened. So it's sad. So I just say to families, this can happen to you. Maybe not the addiction, but taking a pill just out of curiosity. One time at a party, there's a great temptation there. Our young people love to experiment. So please warn them, tell them, and don't let the stigma freeze you in place and not say anything. Some of our neighbors and friends don't want to talk about it. And I faced that road as well. I could have, when I had this happen in 2017, I could have not said anything and just continued with my life, but spare the embarrassment. Because people think, oh, it's embarrassing to a family. It's embarrassing to your good name. But I thought about it and I said, it is embarrassing, but if you want a good name, warn other families so it doesn't happen to them. And so that emotion took over, and I decided that I would accept the invitation in Southampton to join as a co-chair of the opioid task force, which has adopted a new name recently, the Southampton Town Addiction and Behavioral Committee. And we were able to start committees in Islip Town, as well as the Purple campaign that they do there. And a task force was set up in Huntington. And we're working on Babylon, Brookhaven, Riverhead, Southold, and now we're seeing good things happening right here in North Hempstead. Thank you, Supervisor. Thank you, Steve, for arranging this program tonight. And thank you very much for listening. And again, don't just think of me as a guy on TV. Think about me as a grandparent who lost a beautiful young kid because she made one terrible mistake.
Thank you, Ms. Scott, for showing us a picture of your beautiful granddaughter. And I think your granddaughter is reflective of, in 12-month period, 107,000 Americans in 1 year who lost, maybe not a long-term battle. But Drew, we thank you for putting your grief forward so others may benefit. And you mentioned the F word. This is a family disease. It's always been a family disease. It will always be a family disease, both in the struggle to combat opiate use disorder and, unfortunately, in the grief and loss and death and dying issues for tens of thousands of Americans every month nationally. So with that, I know no better speaker and no better agency who understands that this is a family disease than a clinician and a friend to many of us to speak to the family component from the Seafield organization. Please welcome Anthony Rizzuto.
Thank you, Supervisor DeSena. I had the pleasure of meeting the supervisor back in Manhattan, CASA, so I know that this is something that's been dear to your heart for many years. So, I'm gonna give a little bit of a different twist on this because, first of all, the panelists were phenomenal. Everyone that spoke brought something really valuable to the table, and there really are so many different pieces to this. So, my name's Anthony Rizzuto. I'm the Director of Provider Relations at Seafield. I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm a KSAC, which is a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor. So it gives me a little bit of a different perspective. I'm a person that's been working in the trenches for the last 22 years and seen an incredible shift from where we were to where we are. And it's concerning, if I was to put this on a graph, where we will be, right? So I look at it from that perspective. So what I can bring a little different than what we've heard is, what am I seeing in the treatment setting? So a couple of things that come to mind. First and foremost is that patients are coming in sicker and sicker. I think COVID might have played a part in that, because when people, what's common with a person that struggles with substance use disorder is that they don't see themselves as having a problem. And the people that love them and care about them see them as having a problem and start saying, hey, I'm worried about you. You got to get some help. Leave me alone. I don't have a problem. You're the one with the problem. Everybody smokes weed. Everybody sniffs cokes. Everybody takes pills. You don't know what you're talking about. So there's this denial phase. And then eventually, as it progresses and it gets worse, you might be lucky enough to hear those words, all right, fine, I'll go. And then you want to seize that opportunity and get them connected with help. I think COVID might have played a part, because at the time the governor had required hospitals to have a 50% increase in beds, and the first beds that went were rehab beds and detox beds to increase the amount of medical beds. Plus the fact that people were afraid to go in a general setting to possibly expose themselves, to COVID. We really didn't know much about it. So one thing I can tell you is that we're seeing patients sicker and sicker on many levels, primarily mental health. We're seeing a very high level of acuity for mental health. And I'm going to speak a little bit about mental health because, folks, if I learned one thing, I learned that I treated about 1,000 patients throughout my career. And what I've learned is that a majority of my patients, drinking and drugging isn't the problem. It's their solution to the problem. And when we help them to achieve abstinence, right, which is no longer using the substance, typically the problem starts coming to the top. And we have to start peeling the onion back, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So we're seeing people that didn't have mental health issues exhibiting signs of mental health issues. We're seeing people that did have mental health issues that the level of acuity has been exacerbated. One of the other things that we've been seeing lately is a big increase in patients reporting not only an issue with substances, but gambling. And, you guys talked about being a father. I'm a father of a 29-year-old and of a 26-year-old. And you probably have heard this, but you cannot watch a game and not have 10 DraftKings, FanDuel, and all these different kind of commercials. And if you talk to a young person, it's not who are the Yankees playing tonight, who are the Giants playing this week. It's what's the line, what's the under over, what's this, what's that. They're doing it right on their phones, and some of them are getting in a real hole. And you know how they deal with that hole? They sniff, they smoke, they drink. So, and it goes both ways. People with addiction turn to gambling. People with gambling turn to addiction. Now, not everybody that places a bet has a problem. Not everybody that drinks alcohol is a problem. So those are some of the things that we're seeing in the treatment setting. Just quickly, the other issue is the limitation that we have as providers, of the amount of time that we get with a patient. So on one end, we got patients coming in sicker than ever. On the other end, we're getting less and less time that insurance companies are willing to cover for them to be in an inpatient setting. So they're being put back out there 14 days later, right? Rehab really these days is becoming more of a stabilization place than it is a treatment, right? It becomes really hard. What am I supposed to do with somebody with 14 days when this person's been drinking or drugging for 15 years, right? And really has a lot of needs. So there's a lot of challenges. One of the things I want to talk about is I mentioned about the idea of the drink or the drug not being the problem, right? And I'll tell you what I uncovered. So like I said, I treated about 1,000 patients in my career. And one of the things that I saw when I did individual sessions or when we were in group therapy is that there was 4 common things that popped their head up. Right? In some cases, a person had one of those. In some cases, a person had all 4 of those. So the first one that was common in a lot of my patients was we saw this hereditary component. where there was addiction in the family lineage. Now, why does that matter? It matters because we know that anything that's addictive increases brain dopamine. And for the person who has a history of addiction, the amount of dopamine that their brain releases is much greater than someone else. So our director of research and education, Dr. Stephen Dewey, has done 30, 40 years of studies on this. And one of the things he talks about is you take two individuals, you put them in a PET scan. PET scan looks like an MRI with a screen on the top of it. Instead of this bong, 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 it's quiet, right? You put both of them in there. You give both of them a shot of liquor, right? You control for gender and you control for age. Non-alcoholic, alcoholic. You give them a shot of liquor, you put them in a PET scan. You watch the brain of the non-alcoholic. If you were to measure their brain dopamine, there would be an increase of about 900%. The person who has a history of alcohol or in their family lineage, their brain dopamine is going to go up somewhere to the around 30 to 40,000%. See, that's a very big difference. So this person, when they look at their watch and say, yo, let's get out of here, I got to go to work tomorrow. It's not a big thing. This person says, yo, how do you do that? How do you just turn that off, right? So there's a difference, when there's a hereditary component, that's one piece. The second thing that I saw a lot of is this untreated, undiagnosed mental health issue. So many patients, anxiety, depression, bipolar, ADD, ADHD, schizophrenia, schizoaffective. A lot of these folks were not looking to get high. They were looking to be normal. They were self-medicating, which brings me to a whole nother point. If you look at the mental health increase in today's world, I'm concerned. If we do not address the underlying issues, I can't tell you how many calls I'm getting to kids that are 15 years old with severe anxiety and depression. The soil is right for them to have a problem with addiction, right? So mental health is that second one, that untreated, undiagnosed. The third one that we've seen a lot of that impacts addiction is trauma. People that have experienced trauma in their life. I've had so many of my patients talk about being raped, sexually molested, watching, domestic violence in the house, seeing violent episodes, and just living traumatic experiences. We do a lot of work with military. We do a lot of work with first responders. And we have a lot of people that come to us, who, they're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. They're dealing with other traumatic experiences in their life. And they're looking for some help, right? A drink or a drug. I have one person who was an officer in the city and he came to me for an evaluation. And I said, he says, listen, before you do anything, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not an alcoholic. I said, okay. I said, so let me ask you a question. It's probably about 45,000 officers. Why did they send you? And he said, I'll tell you why they sent me. He says, when 9/11 happened, he says, I was on the pile. He said, and I saw things that no human being is supposed to see. And then when I got home, I couldn't sleep. That went on for day 1, day 2, day 3. And then I found that if I had a couple of beers, it helped me sleep. But then a couple of beers didn't cut it. And then it was more beers. And then it was beers and a shot. And then it was more shots. And then it was no beers and just shots. It was this progression. Clearly, this gentleman was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And if we did not address the post-traumatic stress disorder, we'd be dealing with this for a long time. The last one that I would say of those 4 items that I'm mentioning, I put it under the heading of discomfort with self. We see a lot of people, a lot of patients that talk about low self-esteem, insecurities, lack of self-worth, lack of self-acceptance. And it's funny because on the way over here, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, you know what? We've really had a decline in resiliency. And I started thinking, why do we have that decline in resiliency? And I think maybe it has something to do with everybody gets a trophy. Maybe it has something to do with not holding people accountable, not setting some kind of expectations and bars, right? And I don't want to oversimplify it, but you get the point that I'm making. We've changed, right, how we raise our children. The environment that they're growing up in is very, very, very difficult. I mean, we do not allow a 12-year-old to go buy a bottle of Jack Daniels, but they get unfeathered access to the internet and all of the dangers associated with it. So those are 4 things that I see a lot of. Last thing I'll talk about is parenting. The gentleman spoke about, the detective spoke about, please do not fall prey to the idea of not my kid. In addition to my work with Seafield, I started a not-for-profit about 10 years ago called FIST, Families in Supportive Treatment. And I had the privilege of meeting so many incredible human beings that unfortunately lost their 19-year-old, their 20-year-old, their 25-year-old. And I can't tell you how many of them, when they've had an opportunity to speak at an event, said, not my kid. He got a free ride. He got a scholarship for academics, and he got a scholarship. And no, it doesn't happen here, you know. And kind of looking back at it and saying like, oh my God. And I say that because it's so important to not fall prey, right, to this idea that it can't happen here because, you know, we're a good family, we've got a good job, he's got a good education. My son went to a really great school here. And, you know, I just got word that 2 of the kids in that school had 5, they bought 5 Xanax on the street. One had 2 of them. He gave 2 to a friend. He kept 3 of them. Both of them died from overdose. Like Brad and the officer had mentioned, they thought they were getting Xanax. And, you know, and I think about that too, right? I don't want to go through insurance and my parents are going to know because there's an EOB and, you know, I could just get it on the street. Addiction's a family disease. It impacts the entire family. And what we've done in the past is identify the person with the problem and ship them off to be fixed. Coming back to the same environment where addiction has been living for 5, 10, 15 years. So addiction is a family disease, and it's not just the person that struggles with the addiction that needs to recover. The entire family does. Stigma. Thank you so much, Drew, for mentioning stigma, because stigma is such a big piece. It blows me away. I've worked with thousands of families, and it blows me away when they, you know, let me know that, you know, like, we all have people in our life that when it hits the fan, we feel safe or comfortable. If I get the diagnosis of cancer, if I have a house fire, if someone gets in an accident, we have people who we feel that we can lean on, and they can lean on us. Those same folks, my families that I work with, they won't go to them. Why? Because of stigma. Because I have some of them that say to me, I feel like if I was a better parent, it would have been different. I feel like I don't want my son or my daughter or my husband or my wife being labeled as a heroin addict or as an alcoholic and everything that comes along with that label. Stigma kills, folks. Stigma takes a person and has them isolate, right? And here you are in the biggest crisis of your life, right? And you don't feel safe or comfortable talking to somebody else about it where you might be able to get some support. So thank you for taking that step and taking that seat on that there, because it would have been much easier to preserve the family name, right? And not have to deal with that. In fact, let me do my little piece for stigma. I'm going to reintroduce myself. My name's Anthony, and I'm a grateful recovered addict. And through the grace of God, in July, it'll be 30 years for me. And I had the privilege of access to treatment. I have a phenomenal family. I got involved in a 12-step program, and I know that I don't have the ability to moderate. Things that make me feel good, I want more. So it's easier for me to do none than it is to do some. The dangers of the drugs to an undeveloped brain. We know that when a person's brain is fully developed, if you can wait until a person's brain is fully developed, the chances of them having a problem with addiction drops down to 1 to 2%. Unfortunately, we're seeing people, especially now with cannabis, we're seeing people at 14 years old smoking weed. We're seeing the alcohol being introduced early. So there's a lot of challenges that we're dealing with our people. The last thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to wrap up, is I got to tell you, folks, I think we have this idea of the dealer with the hoodie on. My first experience was with a cousin of mine who was like a brother to me. And I was so happy he let me hang out with him and his friends. They were 4 years older. They were 16. I was 12. I was cool. And we went into the friend's house, and he locked his door. And I was like, why is he locking the door? And then he took out this bag. And I was like, oh my God, I think that's true. I was an innocent little boy. And he took this out and he rolled it up. And I'm like, God, please don't let him pass it to me. God, please don't let him pass it to me. I don't care what they do. Don't let him pass it to me. And then it came my way. And I had that Animal House experience. And part of me said, you know this is no good for you. Your mom told you, the person at the school, the police officer that came in, you know you shouldn't do this. Don't do it. And the other side of me said, you don't want them thinking you're a chicken. They won't let you hang out with them anymore. And I caved. That was at 12 years old. So my point in saying that is, be careful. Be aware of who your kids are with. Because my cousin was the closest person in my life to me, you know, and still is till this day. He thought he was sharing something good with me, right? Anyway, folks, I'm going to end with this here. Just, we used to have this term, right, in the meetings of AA or in, you know what? It doesn't sound like you're ready. Why don't you go do some more research? Get beat up a little more, and then you'll get that gift of desperation. You'll be willing to do what you need to do. We don't have that luxury. It was said before. Today, we don't have the luxury of people being more beat up to become ready to get the help that they need. Because just one time, it's been mentioned over and over again, you know, could be the end. Thank you for the opportunity tonight.
What kind of emotional pain can human beings be in April 2023? Shootings, the economy, wars in Europe, 3 years of a COVID pandemic, 1 million family members to COVID-19, isolation, right? Financial insecurity, and of course the fears that we all have about what's going to happen to us. So without healthy coping strategies, and we'll thank you, Supervisor DeSena and Connie Bruno here, who have brought evidence-based prevention programs to local schools. We've been shouting from the rooftops for over a decade that we need from K through 12 in every school so we can teach healthy communication skills, healthy coping strategies, evidence-based prevention models. So thank you to Manhasset CASA and some of the related coalitions that do their work. Project Hope, I see Jeff Stone and colleagues here. With that, really important also to get on record that this family disease. And just to drive it home, we heard from a grandfather. Next, we're going to hear from a mother and then a father. This is a woman who incurred loss. I'll let her tell her story. But she's taking it upon herself as a mission of one to go out and train people in Narcan and shout from any rooftop to people that'll listen so she can hopefully change the trajectory of one life, one family. And she's made a tremendous impact. Welcome, Carol Trottier.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor DeSena, for making this a priority. My name's Carol Trottier, and I used to work in this building. And in February of 2018, I actually organized the first fentanyl training for North Hempstead employees. And in April 2018, my own son, my only son, Alex, died of a heroin fentanyl overdose. So talk about, you know, it can happen to anybody. I know everyone's repeated it many times, but I think the biggest mistake a parent can make, not that I never thought it couldn't happen to me. I mean, I was very aware of, you know, issues, but I really beg all the parents, especially, you know, if people maybe thought, oh, I don't need to come to that thing tonight at town hall. It's about fentanyl. We don't have to worry about that. That's a big mistake because I don't think there's any parent on Long Island and in the country, if you have a child between 12 or your child to 45, do you know fentanyl is the number one reason for death between, I have to put my glasses on, but ages 18 to 45, fentanyl is the leading cause of death. So if anyone thinks they don't have to pay attention to it. So I always say a little bit about my son, Alex. He was 30. He was a licensed welder and was starting a new job. And of course, when he died, I had a fentanyl kit, but I wasn't with him. So I'd like to just talk a little bit about what I've been doing since then, which was for the first 4 years, I would say, grieving a lot. But then in November last year, I always carry a tissue. Excuse me. That's all right. I always carry a tissue. In November last year, I got an invite to go to a DEA summit in Manhattan. And I would say, I don't know who sent me the email. It was kind of odd that I got it, and I was just like thinking, you know what, I'm going to go to that. It just said it was for parents. And basically they wanted to talk to parents who had lost children. And I guess at that point I was getting maybe a little anger, thank you, dear, about the reading about the fentanyl and how it was just worse than ever. And the year my son died was actually, they would say, one of the lowest statistic years. I go, well, that's no comfort if your child was one of those that did die that year. But so I attended the summit, and it was run by a special agent in charge, Frank Tarantino, who's like one of my heroes. And he really listened to, well, first of all, when I got there, there was only like 3 people there. And then all of a sudden, 2 busloads from LICADD showed up. And then all of a sudden, there was 100 people there. And most of them had lost children to heroin or fentanyl overdoses. So I learned a lot about fentanyl that day. I learned a lot about what the DEA is doing. I know the names of the drug cartels. And what they were asking the parents to do is help with education and awareness. Now, I'm not in criminal justice. I don't do the wonderful work that Steve Chasman does. I don't know about rehab. I couldn't, I'm not a police officer. But I did know education and awareness because my job had been in public relations. So I was like, a little light bulb went off in my head, and I said, I can do that. Well, what does he want me to do? I can do it. And they gave us all the literature. So since then, well, I'm still grieving, but I turned my pain into purpose, is what a lot of the moms and dads say, pain into purpose. So I tried reaching out I thought, well, let me work on like getting more Narcan out there. And so I reached out to County Executive Bruce Blakeman, who I had worked with like 20 years ago. And I asked, could I come in to talk to him? Would he consider putting Narcan in all county buildings? I thought it was a little ask. And sure enough, he did it. Maybe it took a month, but he got it done. And then I reached out to my legislator in Suffolk County, Kara Hahn, who's been phenomenal, and asked the same thing, and she got it done. So now Narcan is in like 165 places in Suffolk County buildings. It's a small thing, but I like to think that if I could just hear that, someone was saved with Narcan and a parent didn't have to go through what I'm going through, and hundreds, if you just do the math, if Steve had said, 110,000 people died last year of overdoses, double that, that's the parents that are affected, just the parents. Then there's the siblings, there's the grandparents, like Drew. It's a whole spider web of grief that goes out from one death. So I would just like to urge parents, please don't be shy about talking to your children. Please don't think, my son he's captain of the lacrosse team. My daughter's headed to medical school. Do you know there's really cases that I'm quoting from that those children like that in those circumstances died of fentanyl poisonings right on Long Island. And pester them till they just tell you to please shut up. I've heard enough already. Leave me alone. You should know where they're going and really drive home that point of that the one pill can kill, because as I know everyone's repeated it, the pills is a game changer. It's nothing like there are no recreational drugs anymore. There's not, as Anthony said, that you can fall down a couple times, make some mistakes, and you get a second chance. I like to tell the young people that I know you don't get it now, but death is permanent. There's no reboot. You're not going to restart the game. You're going to leave your parents with broken hearts, and you're just not going to get a second chance. So don't think it's some kind of thing you can't comprehend. You take that pill and don't wake up the next day, that's it. You're not coming back. It's not a vacation. You're not going to get a second try at this. So that's really all. I just like to continue working, educating, and creating awareness, and just spare any parent from having to go through what I'm going through, and hundreds of thousands of other parents from this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Cal. I mean, as far as we're concerned, professionals in the field, law enforcement, you're the real heroes and heroines, no pun intended, who have taken your grief and gone out to make sure that other people are aware. The passion, Carol. To Allison Camarada, thank you for North Shore CASA. You and Connie and some of your colleagues with coalitions are making a tremendous difference. LICADD is proud to partner with many of you. And we heard from Drew, who's a grandfather. We heard from a mother. And we're going to hear from a father. Our next speaker has gotten on the bus, too, to the DEA and to Albany, letting our elected officials know, both locally, statewide, and federally, with our partners in DEA, that we need more help. We need funding. We need awareness. We need campaigns. You know, why is it that the last drug prevention PSA, I remember, was an egg and a frying pan somewhere in the late 1980s? Why on every highway across New York State isn't there awareness? You know, why is there not funding where more social workers and teachers and coalition members and doctors have left the field in droves, primarily because of COVID? What are we going to do to take care of the people that take care of the people? So we have many challenges, but I see these parents and grandparents, these coalition leaders, these elected officials, we are the solution. So with that, Larry and his solution, Mr. Larry Lumbandola.
I want to start off with some good news. I'm going to be a grandparent.
Yeah. All right.
But the bad news is Aunt Lisa won't be there for her sister Allison. This saddens me. I say this every time I speak. On September 19th, 2019 was the worst day of my life. I was writing out a check because my wife and I were going to a wedding the next day, and putting it in the card. And it was about 6 minutes after 9. Lisa was due to go to Seafield for her rehab. And it was unusual she didn't get up. I called her name out and I said, Lisa, Lisa, knocked on the door. Lisa was at the foot of the bed with one knee on the ground. Felt her arm. It was already cold. She was gone. No parent should be going through this. I started very early, even during, it was a 2-day wake, and I had a lot of time to think. And during that time period, I said, I have to do something here. My wife was a teacher in the Levittown School District, so one of her friends said, I got this for you. Got me connected with the superintendent, got me connected with the Levittown Community Action Coalition. To this day, I make no bones about it. I'm a force with this. I don't mean to be egotistical about it, but we have our meetings every month. I go to every meeting. I tell them what I've been able to glean. I preach to them about what I learned going up to Albany, what I learned, as Carol learned, going to the DEA. I gave them the everything I was able to find out. They had a whole curriculum. I went to the meeting really enthusiastic, saying to the steering committee, get this out to the district. Not only did we get it out to the Levittown School District, we got it out to the Island Trees School District. the education and prevention factor has to ring, that bell has to ring every day. Furthermore, I got it out to the Wantaw School District because I'm also, before Lisa even passed, I was part of the, and still I'm part of the Wantaw Lions Club. Be active in your children's lives. That's all I can say. I can say no more. My daughter and all those should all rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry, and to Carol and Drew, to everyone coming out tonight. In closing, before I invite our host, Supervisor Jen DeSena, we're all here tonight for a reason. We have done the effort. The empty chairs in the back of the room represent people that, because of stigma, because of fear, are not willing or able to hear this message. 110,000 Americans a year. This is our plague. So everyone's task tonight, take a Narcan kit, make a phone call when you leave here, go to your Starbucks tomorrow and share this information that you heard from Nassau County Police, that you heard from the U.S. Attorney, that you heard from a prominent clinician in Seafield, that you heard from a mother, a father, and a grandparent of what we're dealing with. You know, if there was some strange monster in like a black van consuming kids, there would be a national response tomorrow. And I'm going to talk to Anthony and respectfully to Mr. King and the federal government and our local law enforcement. Maybe we all need to show up on the steps of Congress in September or on August 31st. All of us, meaning all the moms and dads and grandparents. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, plus the 30 million Americans living in long-term recovery from substance use disorder. Respectfully, Supervisor DeSena, because you're a partner, maybe some of us are still fool enough to believe that we're owed a response. This is a national crisis. It's not just the sons and the daughters that families have lost. It's future social workers or journalists or elected officials or teachers or coalition leaders or future moms and dads and grandpas that they could have been. This is a national scourge. And LICADD considers, in partnership, in concert with you, we are responsible. For those of us who know self-help, there's a sign in a lot of church basements that says, when anyone anywhere reaches out, may the hand of assistance be there. For that, we are all responsible. We all know someone struggling or a family struggling right now. Take Narcan and visit their home. Call LICADD tomorrow and get involved on a volunteer basis. Call Supervisor DeSena and make suggestions what will change, Allison, Connie, what will change this community. Because you know, no one's a bad person. People are scared. Some people feel powerless. But Supervisor DeSena, you've given us a forum to change some of that dialogue tonight. And I think a lot of good information was exchanged here. To Mr. Kennedy, Bruce, thank you for your guidance and mentorship through the years. I'll invite Supervisor DeSena up, and maybe before we all leave, we can all take a group photo. But thank you, Supervisor DeSena.
Thank you so much, Steve. And before we conclude, I want to invite up a couple more people. Dr. Nellie Taylor Walthrust from the North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center works with the town of North Hempstead with our Project Independence, but in many other ways too. And I want to invite her up. She's a wonderful resource for the town.
Good evening. And first, I would like to thank Supervisor DeSena for creating this platform that we have the opportunity to come together. You're right, it is. It is a national crisis. And my name is Dr. Nellie Taylor Walthrust, and I am the director of North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center that leads place an outpatient mental health and chemical dependency treatment program for adolescents and their families. I've had the privilege of being in the addiction field for 40 plus years, and I've been a substance abuse counselor and program director for North Shore Child and Family Guidance Adolescent Treatment Program from its inception for 34 years. And at our agency, we are the only licensed clinical program that treat adolescents. There are other programs that treat adolescents and adults, but our focus is adolescents that are either experimenting or addicted or at risk for using substances. So you will operate from a different model because adolescents do not reach the same level of trauma or bottom, and we use the word bottom, that an adult may reach. So therefore, you have to have special focused treatment, and we are a North Shore. If anybody know anything about North Shore Child and family, that word family, we do not treat children or adolescents or young adults without a family member being involved because it is a family illness. You treat the whole family. And just to, I'm not going to, repeat what has been said because a lot of factual information has already been given, and it is a community collaboration. And we have to work together. We have to work because what one agency cannot combat this problem by itself, but working collaboratively together, beginning with the local government here. And like I agree with Steve, it needs to go all the way to, it is a national problem. So we just cannot minimize and keep our little thing here. We have, because we are advocates, we're responsible for children, young adults, and people's lives across this country. So at North Shore Child and Family Guidance Center, our adolescent treatment program consists of co-occurrent work. I think Anthony mentioned a little bit about kids are coming through the door. What are we seeing? What are we seeing? And the fact that what we're seeing are adolescents, we're seeing children as young as 10 years old have already, they start with, now we're back to the gateway drug, nicotine. Kids are now using nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, and pills. They know how to get it off the street. Don't know what they're using, what they're getting, but kids don't ask questions. If you say it's okay, you have it, all right, let's, okay, no problem. That is our number one concern. First, we have to break down the stigma in the professionals because there are clinicians that don't want to use the word addiction or substance use, marijuana, that is, not clean. But it's okay to come in and say, oh, anxiety, depression, they self-harming. But if you ask the question, we have to ask the question. If you have been self-harming, you have school phobia, you have anxiety and depression, how have you been coping for the last 6 months? And if you ask the question, they will say, you have to, speak the language. Have you used any kind of substance? Have you used nicotine? Have you used alcohol? Are you using marijuana? Have you been experimenting using substance out of grandma's medicine cabinet? What are you doing? How have you been coping? And 9 times out of 10, adolescent children are very open. They say, well, I've been, Now you've been in treatment, you've been dealing with your anxiety, dealing with depression, and nobody asked you about your substance use. That's a concern. So the education has to begin with the professionals. Don't assume just because, you go to see a professional, they're going to ask the necessary question to get to the root of what is going on with this child and their families. Ask the question, then you'll find out what is going on in the home. If there's a 16, 17-year-old, yeah, he smokes, he goes out, he drinks, mama don't say anything, dad doesn't say anything, so it's okay. I'm in my bedroom, 18 hours out of the day, I come down only to get something to eat, and parents don't check what's going on. Why are you in your room? What are you doing? And you have to ask the question. And that is our number one concern right now. The kids are coming in. The good thing about it at the Leeds place, we have our adolescent substance use treatment program. We also have mental health treatment. But in the addiction field, The best outcome for treatment, you have to do the co-occurrence, it's called co-occurrent work. You have to do this work simultaneously. If they're using substance, if they're coming in, if they presented with a mental health diagnosis, and then you explore that then you find out that there is substance use, whether they're medicating, or whether they're addiction, or they are experimenting, you must address both at the same time to get a positive outcome. And at North Shore Child and Family, in our clinic, we do not advocate, we do not use a harm reduction model, because these are children's lives. Now, everybody that comes in that's using substance, you have to have a baseline where you're going to start. So if you're smoking 5 times a week, that you're on the pathway of harm reduction, moving toward an abstinent model. And these kids we get referrals all over Nassau County. There is not a school district in Nassau County that have not been through our doors to seek help for their adolescents that are in trouble. More kids have school refusal than ever before. More kids are being suspended from school for possession. Kids are bringing, yes, there's weaponry, but they are bringing marijuana, they bring the vape pens with nicotine, alcohol, and they're getting suspended from school. The school districts are not playing. They take it very, 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 very serious. And we as professionals, we have a responsibility, is to be that voice. And when the next phase is working with the families. Families like education. Families are in denial that this problem, oh, maybe it's not that bad. You really, I know my child. You do know, maybe you know your child when they're in your presence. But when your child is in the presence of their friends and their peers, your child will emerge as somebody you don't know. You do not know. And the kids are in the best education as professionals. And I would love to see, at our farm, we have a great committee here. Get the adolescents here. Get them here. If you really want to know what is going on, what's out there, where they get it, the source, who's doing what, they will tell you. So we have to be open, we have to be responsible, and we have to obtain, street knowledge from the kids. They know exactly what is going on out there, and treating families. And that is one thing we had our committee meeting here with Supervisor DeSena a few months ago, and it was and I said, every time, I don't just show up for gatherings for the purpose of just being here. I'm going to have to do something. And when I went back to my clinic, the first thing I wanted to make sure that every clinician ask the question, become familiar with co-occurrent disorders, obtain, and in my office, we have the Narcan kit, and as part of OASAS that funds and license our program, it is now a requirement. Every family that goes through treatment, and when they successfully complete treatment, are they ready to leave, or they leave voluntarily, offer them a Narcan kit. We have the fentanyl test strips, teaching and training the staff. How do you use this? What do you do? How do you, show the parents? That is on site and available. And now that we have these resources, we have to push it out in the community. In the schools, we have prevention staff that is in Westbury, a middle school and high school. But I agree with what Steve said. That's too late. They need to be in the elementary schools teaching substance abuse prevention in the early grade, as far as kindergarten, teaching them to abstain and stay away from drugs, because high risk community where there is readily available, accessible. It is available in every community. So we have a responsibility to educate this generation and do whatever we need, whatever is necessary to get between these kids and substance use. So for the sake of time, thank you so much, Supervisor DeSena. I look forward. We are in the trenches, and you're not in the trenches alone. Everybody here and I applaud everybody that have shared. We are here to make a difference, and we're standing with you. So thank you so much.
And one last speaker would like to say hello, Jeff Stone from Project Help, and Kathy. Okay, you'll be a team. Kathy Levinson. How they are reaching some of our young people in a very helpful way.
Thank you, Jennifer DeSena, Supervisor, for inviting us here. We're very honored to be with folks that have lost a loved one and clinicians that are helping a lot of other people that are in pain. And my partner, my friend, well, I should say my colleague and friend, my partner is my wife, home. But we co-founded Project Help Long Island because we both got sick and tired of seeing on news, like here, for instance, reading online in print media, all the tragedies that are happening, all the sad, sad stories that are going on. And, I decided to do something with it. And, Kathy said, let's do it. So that's what we're doing. We're spreading the message, awareness for mental health and wellness and co-occurring substance use disorder. We're helping to educate individuals and families. We create events. We have a mental health awareness march down Plandome Road, May 20th. We invite you all to come, participate as vendors. There's plenty of room. And we do this in Port Washington as well. We also have Zoom discussions on various topics under the mental health umbrella and drug use.
Thanks, Jeff. I just wanted to add that in February, Jeff and I had the opportunity to travel to Albany and speak before New York State Kiwanis. And we had the chance to hold a workshop on mental health and drug issues. And we were given a big room, a big amphitheater room. And personally, I was a little nervous that maybe nobody would come. Maybe all those rows would sit empty. But you know what happened? The room was full. The room filled up. There wasn't an empty seat. People were standing. And when we asked the question, who here in this room knows or has lost somebody in their family? Every hand went up. So that was a very powerful visual image. And so we know what our work is. We know what we need to do. Like you say, Steve, it's a scourge, and it is, and we have to take it on. We have to take it on. Thank you.
I agree. Just one last thing. I received a lot of strength from some of you that had spoken tonight, especially about stigma and going forward as advocates and professionals. And so I received the strength enough to break my own anonymity. I have 33 years in recovery. People had asked me, what skin do you have in the game? Why are you doing this? Well, now you know, because I went through the fire. I was in the fire. I know what it's like. I know what that pain is like. And if I grew up in today's environment, chances are I'd be a statistic. So, again, I was there. I know what it's like. And I want to help everybody as much as I can. And that's what we do. That's what we do. So I'm coming from a real level of being there. And my story even frightens a lot of other people that have gone through it. I've got a very, difficult, tough story. But again, it's who I am today, and I'm grateful to be where I am. And that's a fact. So thank you very much.
Okay, so thank you all so much. We've heard a lot of stories. I think the most important thing is that we talk about it. We have the very tragic stories that you've shared, and you're real people. We all need to go home and tell our kids, tell our neighbors that we met people who went through this personal hell and are working so that other people don't have to go through it. So we owe it to them, and we owe it to our communities to spread the information. Thank you to the U.S. Attorney's Office, Nassau County Police, and Seafield, all of our LICADD, all of our healthcare professionals for for giving us the facts that we will now go out. We'll take Narcan out with us. The more Narcan that's out in the community, the more that is available in case of poisoning, because there's poisoning out there. So again, thank you all for coming. Thank you for continuing to talk and to spread the message so that we can save other families the tragedy that we know too much about. Thank you all.